Hello and welcome to Ladies Corner with Tea. Every week we interview women of substance, women of fire, women of salt, women who are able to add to the collective conversation in our communities. And tonight, I'm not going to disappoint you. We have an eminent woman all by herself. She is a chairman of the Anti-Racism committee in Edmonton. She's Shalini Sinha. Let's welcome everybody, Shalini Sinha, the chairperson of the Anti-Racism committee. Need to bring her in. Let's do it. Hi, Shalini. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on to the show. I'm really grateful. Now, you've done a lot of things. Before the show, you were saying 22 years in Ireland. That's pretty much half my lifetime, eh? So,
I think I can define it as a generation.
oh, a generation. That's a good
I
way to
spent a
put it.
generation in Ireland, and now I'm back in
Did
Edmonton.
you did you ever feel like you were part of that community? Like, did you ever feel totally Irish, or were you ever Irish enough?
That is such an excellent question. Such an excellent question. So, one of the things to understand about Ireland is that it's a colonized country. It was colonized. It was the first, the oldest, and just as brutal a colonization by the British as any other British colony. So, Irish people in Ireland can feel fairly um, uncomfortable or defensive about outsiders because their experience has not been great. Having said that, the heart is so warm and generous. So it's an interesting insider outsider experience. It's hard for Irish people to understand or kind of integrate that an outsider coming in could be seen as Irish. And yet, I think in lots of ways, because I was so involved in Irish society and Irish culture in so many ways, and I think as I gained more and more success, more people were happy to claim me as their own. So it's an interesting bridge that any of us who've been immigrants and have diverse identities have to walk all the time. You know, that's all I can
Mm.
say about that.
Mm. I know a little bit about Irish culture, and I would remember, if I'm correct, that dogs, blacks, and Irish would not be allowed. Is that correct? And so,
Absolutely.
so it meant blacks and Irish had some
Yeah.
sort of subliminal um, consci
Yeah.
affinity.
Yes. And it's something I try and bring across. So, and it's an area that I've really looked into, I've researched and studied. If you look at the colonization of Ireland and how it was set up, it was set up in the same way as any other racism. And it was set up so long ago. There's, literature that shows that in 600 AD, the Normans sent a travel writer to write about Ireland with the agenda of undermining Ireland's status so that it was okay to go in and colonize it. And so, literature that this writer wrote things like the Irish were dark-skinned people, monkey-like, without ever
Mhm,
going to Ireland, created all these racial stereotypes that we'd all be
mhm,
familiar with. And that
mhm,
endured. So yeah, that whole thing of no blacks, no Irish, no dogs, you know,
mhm.
it's all there.
Now, for those who do not know about the fact that you're also a social justice activist, a speaker, a writer, an academic, a coach, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Could you expatiate on all the different layers that makes up Miss Shalini Sinha?
Yeah, sure. I first became engaged in social activism, social justice very young as a 14-year-old, and it was around standing against suicide and alcohol and drug addiction for teens, particularly depression and suicide, and speaking out on it and speaking out about how it feels and how adults and parents maybe should think more about how to connect with teenagers. That's how I started. And then shortly after that, I realized the environmental issue. This is a long time ago. But when we see the teens today who are so moved and terrified and upset about the environmental issue, that was me. That was me 30 years ago. Frightened, terrified. We didn't have much time to turn this around. And I became a very passionate and committed activist for change. And it's that experience that changed my whole focus. Some of your listeners will know that us Indians and Asians were only given 3 options. You should become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. And if you do anything other than that, you're a bad Indian, because your duty is to do your best, be educated, and then uplift the whole family. Like, it's not for yourself. You need to do this to uplift your community, to support everyone. But I changed my whole focus to studying social justice. So I studied anthropology and religious studies. I then went to Ireland and studied women's studies. I studied the intersection of gender and racism. It's been my passion and my focus with everything I've done ever since. And I'm mostly interested in, how do we get human beings to change their mind or to see a new point of view? And how do we get them to change behaviors on a mass level towards something that's good for all of us, and end suffering? Those are the things I'm interested in, T. Aren't I fun? I'm fun on a Friday night, really.
I mean, well, I noted that your master's was you did, hold on a second, and religious studies, a BA in anthropology and religious studies, but that element of religious studies was in Hinduism. My question is, what role has faith played? Because when you're involved in environment, when you're passionate about how human beings change their minds, and in this planet, we all need to understand how human beings relate if we want to rise in any system. So my question is, what role did faith play a big role in forming you, or getting you from there to here?
Oh, that's such a great question. I will tell you that I wasn't raised with any obvious or overt instruction in around faith or spirituality, but our cultural background we were so immersed in it. So I was really raised in a family that followed Mahatma Gandhi. My father was born in India in a time that Gandhi was alive. My father was raised extremely poor in India, and we come from a part of India that's still the poorest part of India, because it was really, really oppressed during British rule. And so Mahatma Gandhi came to our area, and it's looking there and working there that he decided to start his Quit India movement. And he formed some experimental primary schools, and my father went. That's where my father started schools, in Gandhi's experimental schools. He lived in that area. So when I was growing up, we followed Gandhi's example more than anything, and it was nonviolence. It was understanding that there is a truth about humans that transcends cultural and religious differences, that we have more in common than not, and that we must always stand for each other and not against each other. So that was the strongest thing I learned, and that drove me. That really, really formed me and drove me. But I will say this about faith, that later in my life, I went through far more difficult experiences, very personally difficult experiences as a woman who was, really set up to be on the receiving end of structural and personal abuse. I really did suffer a lot. And I think I took the strength from what I learned in my early childhood to help get myself out and my children out. But there's a reality that one person can't do it on their own. I really did need to learn how to stop trying to do it all by myself, let myself fall, and find out who was there to help carry me. And it's in that time that I learned faith in a far more significant way. And to me, faith is trust and belief, and it transcends specific religions or cultures. It is about letting yourself know you're not alone.
Shalini, those words are so beautiful. Faith is trust, faith is belief, and that is beautiful. So, all of that is sounding so good. How did you get to be the chairperson? Do I say chairwoman? Chairperson of the, and what do I say?
I
Chairwoman,
think I think
chairperson?
I think you can take your pick. And because of not trying to make those decisions all the time, I just say chair. But
Chair.
yeah, but I
Ah,
am happy with chairwoman, and I will accommodate taking the space of a chairman if someone wishes. Um, how did I
chair.
come?
Yeah. Tell us
Yeah,
that story. How did you get to where you are now?
you know, when I returned to Edmonton, and I had spent 20 years already working in the anti-racism space in Ireland, and I had learned so much. And I was aware that here we were starting to use the term anti-racism. You know, here before we used to use or cross-cultural communication.
Mhm.
Um, we used to use different words, and finally people were starting to name racism and name anti-racism. And I really needed to connect. I needed to come and connect and meet the people who were involved in this space. But I also really wanted to serve. Obviously, if I'm going to live in a community and anti-racism is an agenda, I want to be involved. I want to be part of it. The same reason why we all do, because I want to make our society better for my children and for their children and for me and for everyone around us.
Mm.
And so I applied, and I was grateful to be appointed.
All right.
Now, the very interesting thing that happened is as soon as we were appointed, we had maybe one orientation meeting and then a meeting, and then we were suspended because of this pandemic. So COVID came in, and immediately everything had to shut down. Meetings had to shut down. The city had to stop all kinds of efforts and change its admin structure, and so it made the decision to stop supporting all of its committees at the time, including the anti-racism committee, and we stopped. And I suppose I was insightful as to how disappointing and discouraging that would be for members. And
Mhm.
I reached out personally, and I reached out personally to just get to know members and invite us to meet together anyway,
Mm.
informally. And we did, and we ended up meeting probably every 2 weeks. Some of us
Aw.
met every week, and some of us met every 2 weeks. And there was a lot going on. I mean, COVID was really, there was such a racism dynamic to what was happening with COVID.
Mm.
And then there was the murder of George Floyd,
Oh yeah.
and all the protests. And what that did
Right.
is it brought anti-racism to the
Right.
mainstream awareness. There was a lot for us to do, and we were in this suspension period, so we were meeting personally and informally, and it was just very important to me to get to know every member personally, just on a friendship level.
Mm.
And I can't say I don't know what it was, but something out of that probably led to being nominated and then being elected as the
Mm.
chair. Yeah, probably.
Mm.
But
Uh,
it could have been something else. I don't know. They didn't tell me.
it's all good because I think they got the right chair for the job, really. Because if you're meeting, last year was black, 2020 was a dark, difficult year. And
Yeah.
if you would take the time out to get to know people, half the city were in depression. You know, most of us were
Yeah.
isolated. We were cut off suddenly, and a lot of us were just trying to understand and navigate what this thing was. This The pandemic meant a lot to many people. So that was leadership right there. So do you guys meet now? Have you been on suspended?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay.
So we were suspended for probably about 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were brought back in August. So probably June, July, we were suspended, and then we were brought back in August. If it was probably just like 2 months, but it felt like a lifetime.
Oh yeah.
And
Right.
in the middle, in the time that we were suspended, there were the public hearings on the police budget, funding the police. And we were mentioned a lot. You know, people said, well, there's an anti-racism committee, but we were still in suspension, and we were watching this, and we were terribly frustrated, and you know, we wanted to be involved, and we were also still new. And then we came back in August, and boy, we hit the ground running. And immediately we had a working group to, luckily, I think some of our members personally lobbied. I think I'm telling stories. I don't really know, but that's what I think. That's what I think happened. And part of the motion was that we could advise on our own mandate. We were making the position that the councillors formed our mandate, and that was great. But now that we were formed, we wanted the chance to redress our mandate from an anti-racist perspective. So we had that work. We started that. The task force on community safety and wellness was formed, and we started conversations about what would we be watching, what would we be doing. We started to think about structures to set up. We really hit the ground running.
I mean, you've got quite a formidable team. Trent Bailey, set this off. He's an amazing brother, as a comrade. A shout out to Trent if he's watching.
Shout out, Trent. Thank you, Trent. Trent introduced me to you, and I really, really appreciate it.
I love Trent sincerely. He's a good big brother. He watches out for me. So the next thing is, for people watching, what do you do? Anti-racism committee sounds nice. It sounds flowery, but what exactly is it that you do there?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I appreciate you asking. It gives me a chance to kind of let people know what we do and how they can engage with us. So our mandate is specific, but it's also so broad. Our mandate is to raise awareness and to catalyze action around anti-racism in Edmonton. We have the opportunity to advise City Council, and that is probably the most interesting part of what we do. That's why we're formed, and the one that deserves the most thought. So the way we do it is we meet in our monthly meetings, and our monthly meetings take place every second Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. And any member of the public can email us and ask to be an observer, and you can watch our meetings. So we meet in our main meetings, but then we divide up into small groups. We have subcommittees and we have working groups. And because we're brand new, we're still forming our subcommittees. So the working groups are those of us who get together on an issue and it's temporary. So we had a working group around advising our mandate, revising our mandate. We have, we have small working groups, and then we have subcommittees that are longer lasting. So the subcommittees that we formed at the moment, one is public engagement and outreach. Another is the funding subcommittee, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then we have our community safety subcommittee. And we will be forming more subcommittees around different issues. Our greatest challenge is that racism and so anti-racism permeates into every aspect of life. And how do we as a small group of people respond to everything that might be happening in the city around racism? And the sad truth is that we can't. But I suppose it's an opportunity then for us to decide priorities and focus and see what biggest difference can we make each year. But the biggest thing that we can do is formulate a position and speak to City Council and advise them on what we think should be happening around any reviews they're doing, any policies they're developing, and any issues that are going on. And I do think one of the things that we have probably succeeded in doing very well, even though we didn't know if we were going to achieve it, but I think we've succeeded in building good relationships with city councillors and city administration. And what is happening is that they are also now coming to us and saying, okay, we're reviewing this and we need an anti-racist perspective on it. So what is your position?
Okay, but the thing is, the present mayor is leaving and half City Council are seeking re-election. Would you have to do all that work again after the municipal elections in September?
Some of it, yes. The city administration will be the same. So the city government makes up two different sections. It's our elected councillors, as well as the administration that then are empowered to do the work that they direct. So the relationships we formed within the city administration will stay the same, and a lot of the counselors are going to change, and we will need to do that again. And again, it's an opportunity, right? So in framing what I'm going to say next, I want to say that we do have subcommittees, and members of the public can reach out, or we can connect to be involved with subcommittees to help us do this work. And in some way, we're going to need to be thinking about the election coming up. And there's a little bit of a tricky area because we are functioning as a semi-city body. We're an advisory committee to the city. And so there need to be some guidelines and around what, how we're getting involved with elections. But at the same time, there's a very strong role that we need to play around highlighting an anti-racist perspective through the elections, and perhaps, holding out a standard that we want candidates to engage on. And I think we really want community support and help with that.
Okay, so my question is, so you do a lot of advisory, the city council, they really don't have to listen to you all. They take it on good, cognizance. So we heard Shalini say, we heard the council, but listen, must they listen to your guidance? Must they follow anything you say?
So this is the interesting path from activism to political strategy, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. So I was an academic doing academic research, writing academic papers, speaking at conferences, saying stuff. And at one point I got invited, and I didn't even understand it, but I accidentally got invited to do a screen test and then hired to be a presenter of television, telling intercultural stories. And I had to learn really fast the difference between an academic story and a media story.
Oh, yeah.
Two different worlds. So I'm framing that to say that this is an interesting question, because it's the path that we're walking between the community activist and the politician, right? So here are the facts. We're there to advise, and city council can do whatever they want. But, and you might say, well, that's demoralizing. We feel like, do we have any power? Can we do anything? But then there's a bit of strategy involved. Like, how does it look if your anti-racism advisory committee has advised you on something, and you decide you're not going to do that? How does that look?
Yeah, but the thing is, members of the public will know what you advise city council to do or not do, because most of this advice is behind closed doors, and it's not like, we have hours in the day to be sifting through what was the last thing you said to Councillor A or to Mayor Iverson.
Absolutely true.
We wouldn't know, would we? So
absolutely true. Absolutely. So first, I will say that none of it's behind closed doors, actually.
Oh, really?
unless it serves in some way to have private conversations, and it always serves to have private conversations.
Okay.
But our meetings are public, right?
Okay.
So what we're deciding on and what we're discussing, what we're updating on, and our positions are public. But that doesn't mean that every member of the public has a chance to go and look up our meetings, right? I have had the opportunity to speak to city council twice. I feel like it's 3 times, but I think it's only twice. Because I've spoken at subcommittees, and those are public. But still, it doesn't mean that every member of the public has a chance to go look that up. What is really important is that we build in a structure for communicating from the anti-racist communities, because as I'm saying, we are all people with lived experience of racism. We've been working in this space for some time. We're on this committee not only because we have lived experience of racism, but because we have connections in the community and have some greater understanding about how this works, so that we can create positions and give advice. And we come from a grassroots background. I'll tell you something. For example, the biggest issue I feel that has been on the agenda for the last 4 months has been these attacks against Black Muslim women in Edmonton. And the question is what to do. Like,
oh, we're coming to that. Okay, you can preface it right now, but I've got a big question about that.
Great. Okay, I'll give you this preface now. You can decide me if you want to ask. You can decide if you want to ask me the big question now or later. I'm happy either way. But hang on.
And what is falling down there? Is that your coat hanger?
No, it's not a coat hanger. It is. Okay, so my son is very interested in lighting, in film lighting, and has worked on a couple films and television program ads in lighting and things.
Oh,
so
wow.
I set up here, and you see I have a big reflection behind me.
Yes.
And I said, is there anything you can do about the reflection? And he's like, yeah, we got skills for that. So, so he put up this thing to help, I can't remember the term, but it was like to stop the reflection on one side, and then I have it on the other side.
It's really bright in Edmonton. There's not much we can do about it if you look at my back.
Yeah. So that's just what fell on me there. Yeah, but so I was saying the biggest issue in the last 4 months has been these attacks on Black Muslim women and how to respond. And the question is, what clear advice do we give? And in order to, we could have and wanted to write a letter right away to make a statement about it. And there's two reasons why that didn't happen right away, none of which included that we didn't care about the issue, we didn't notice the issue, and the issue didn't hit us deeply. In fact, the first attack happened the night that we had a meeting, and it completely affected us because that could have been any one of us. We have Muslims on our committee, we have Black women on our committee, we have women of color on our committee, and it affects us deeply. And because we're also very new, we don't have all those communication streams in place. And there's a report on this by the branch that supports us. And we need to figure out how to get those communication structures in place. Right. But the next piece is, aside from coming out to say, this is terrible, this is wrong, stop doing it, come on, guys, get out and show your allyship, stand with us, keep us protected. No, don't be okay that Black Muslim women are not feeling safe in our city, that people are being attacked. Stand up together and let's do better. The question is, what specific advice could we give? And that has taken time. We've had members going to events. We've had members going to meetings, listening. In our last meeting, we put aside quite a bit of time to report back on what we've been hearing, what are people saying, and trying to form our positions. And so we're working on it. But we have no benefit from doing things in secret. It's just going to take us a little bit of time, and I'm sorry that it's frustrating. It's frustrating for us too, to get those communication structures in place so that we can have that flowing, open communication that we want to have.
Okay, I hear you. A question has come here from a member of the audience, Seema. Thanks for sending this question in. So when the public joins these meetings, do they just observe or do they participate too? So if you're there, you have a question for Shalini, hit the comment button and we will get to see your question, and hopefully Shalini will answer the question. So did you get that? Do they observe or they join the writing letters? What do we do?
That's a great question. Thank you, Seema Shea, who sent in that question. When you register for it, then you just observe. You're observing the meetings, but you're getting a chance to see what's happening. So the discussion stays amongst the appointed members, and all the voting stays amongst the appointed members. Now, so it's one way of observing and seeing what we're doing and keeping an eye on what's happening. But the fact that you can't speak at the meetings and you can't vote at the meetings doesn't change the fact that we do want to hear from you. And so there's other ways to have your voice heard with us. You can write to us. So there's our email. It's arac@edmonton.ca. You can write to me directly to the chair. That's chair.arac@edmonton.ca. And last week, we just had our first community event. We had an event that came together at short notice because of the timing of the report coming out. We had an event to bring together community members involved with anti-racism who have been working on and are interested in the report that came out on policing from the Community Safety and Wellness Task Force. And we had an event to create space and resources and support for community members to be able to process through the report and think about what their own perspective was. It was a very, very successful event. I was very pleased with it. And I think it's the kind of thing we want to do more of.
Okay. I mean, what I like to hit is, I appreciate the answer. Thank you, though. And then I just projected your question, sorry, your email address, if members
Yeah.
of the public wanted, to write to you or not. What you do is very important. It may be underestimated because just whilst you were speaking, I saw the enormosity of it. Racism can be subtle many times. It's a Megan story, isn't it? It's really subjective. What you may consider racism may be considered as sexism. We've got to be sensitive about. So it makes your portfolio really wide. And the question is 2 hours on the second Wednesday of every month really enough to tackle this enormosity of a problem?
Never. No, definitely not enough. And for me, it's as a chairperson who forms the agenda and manages through the agenda, it's a challenge every month to make sure to see how we're going to work through this. And I've started to develop into a rhythm with the agenda, and I'll share that with you. But I will say it's not the only place that we do work. And the subcommittees will form a larger part of how the work gets done. So it's our conversations that we're having. It's the way people are responding to us. It's our informal meetings and our subcommittee meetings that add up to, as well, the meetings that we have monthly. And on that note, I will say that our members, as I think is actually natural in this space, are so dedicated and so committed. They put in so much time. This is a volunteer position. There is no compensation. We have fought that the members of the Anti-Racism Committee ought to receive an honorarium for their work, and we're fighting for that on a couple levels. One is philosophically, that you're asking people with lived experience of racism who suffer the outcomes of racism to advise you on racism, and it's important to offer some sort of compensation for that, given how racism works. and it's been a journey to try and,
Are you going to get compensated, or just going to be swept under the carpet?
I don't know. It's a journey and it's moving forward. I did, myself and the current Vice Chair, Faisal Kiwamera, spoke to a report on this to City Council. I'm trying to remember the date so that people can look it up. And, it was a conversation that we were trying to move minds to understand something they hadn't understood before about the structural inequality of a system. And honestly, they didn't even know we were going to speak to it. They didn't realize that there was anything with this report. We registered to speak. We had our 5 minutes each to speak, but the questions and answers took about an hour. And then after that, they discussed it for a half an hour to try and figure out what actions they could take. So I could see that we were moving minds, and that was very, very valuable. This work takes time. It takes time. But yeah, I mean, you have to be patient, and you need every voice, and you need every part of the strategy, including those who are going out to protest on the street. We need those voices heard. That's what's putting pressure on, including the quiet conversations that happen. We need it all. We need to work together.
So your mandate ends 2022. I've got 2 questions here real quickly. Do you feel that the introductory groundwork you've been doing will be carried on by maybe yourself in the next, after 2022, if you get called back, since it's by appointment? Or, I mean, you've done a lot of things and you're still building the framework and the structures. What do you see, at the end of this, of your term? And I wanted you to comment on something I saw on Twitter last night. Heather Campbell, she, I believe, was the anti-racism committee chair for Calgary. And when she submitted that report, the government pretty much didn't do anything about it, in my own opinion. Do you think that at the end of this term, what happened in Calgary could happen right here in Edmonton?
Yeah. No, well, okay. Obviously it can. Now, but I think that is Heather Campbell. She is from Calgary, and I could have this wrong, but I think it was when she was in her position as chairperson for the provincial anti-racism committee. And they
Oh, I
delivered
see.
a report and the provincial government ignored it. Now,
Okay.
let's think a little bit about the point of view of this provincial government and these issues. So I guess we could anticipate that they would ignore it. Something that we can do here from the Anti-Racism Committee in Edmonton is advise our councillors and our mayor to write to the provincial government and, ask them to take that report seriously. We can keep publicizing that. So we do have some things that we can do here as a second largest city and a government city in Alberta. Yeah, is it possible that we will make recommendations, we will make a report, and it'll be completely ignored? Absolutely. And this is where we need the community and we need communication to have an outcry. We need people to have an outcry, and we need to keep strategizing. This is where, we step back onto the activist road and we say, okay, hang on a minute. The Anti-Racism Committee thoughtfully and intelligently gave these recommendations, and City Council did nothing. Okay, City Council, explain yourself, So, yeah, these things are possible. The power ultimately lies with the elected officials, with any government. We advise and they do. I'm learning and we're sharing about how the structure actually works. I shared a little bit about what I was learning at our meeting last week on Thursday, the community meeting. Okay, so T, to come back to your first question, which is what I want to do in this term, and will these foundations be set? So every member is appointed for potentially 6 years,
Okay.
and that is reviewed every 2 years. But in the inaugural year, half of them were reviewed after 1 year, just so that so it was staggered. Not everyone was up for renewal at the same time.
Okay.
We also made a decision that a chairperson elected would only be able to hold that position, be reelected once. And so be elected and reelected once, so hold it for 2 terms. And so I'll be in this. So I'm just finishing 1 term. I was reelected for the next term. And so far, according to those decisions and the policies we put in place, this is my 2nd term. And you bet I have goals. You bet. When I was elected, the first thing I did was I defined my own goals. And my own goals have been to leave a legacy of establishing a culture and spirit and structures within the Anti-Racism Committee. When we gave our advice on the change in our mandate, and City Council accepted it and then ratified it, it became a bylaw. So a bylaw can't be changed easily. And so our existence exists in law in the city of Edmonton, so that can't be changed. And then the next thing that's very important to me is to keep my eye on skill building and leadership development so that we can keep having some consistency and moving through to develop strong leaders to keep taking on the mantle to the next step, keep pushing the needle on what we're doing. Does that help answer your question?
Oh, that's beautiful. You've gone over and beyond. Okay, I'm about to let you go, but the truth is some women don't feel safe in Edmonton anymore, especially if you wear a hijab, if you're in a hijab, if you're Black. It seems like several disadvantages. You're a Muslim when you're Black. It's just so unfortunate and sad. Just this past week, Minister Lagrange had the rock thrown at our constituency window. Janice Irwin, MLA Irwin, has had graffiti written. MLA Shepherd was saying on Twitter that a man came to his home and was asking him, dodgy questions about his affiliations to Antifa. Everybody knows that MLA Shepherd is not affiliated like that. So is the government doing enough to make us feel safe? I mean, what was going on in Edmonton? This,
Before I went to Ireland, I grew up just outside Edmonton. And my knowledge of this place, even though I love Alberta, I love this land, I love the weather here, I feel very connected. My knowledge of this place is that there are deep-seated roots of historic racist thinking. It's never logical and it's always frightening. So, honestly, have women felt safe in Edmonton? Have women of color felt safe in Edmonton? Have Black women felt safe in Edmonton? Have Muslim women felt safe in Edmonton? I would say that there is an issue there where it has always been hard for us to feel safe, and now it's even harder. And when these attacks have happened, it's those people who were attacked are victimized and traumatized. But those of us who know it could have been any of us are also traumatized. And the ripple effect of fear that goes out is wide and painful. So healing is required. Mm-hmm. We need to find spaces to bring our groups together and be with each other and heal. We need to find ways to mobilize the wider community to engage in that healing with us. And we need to find ways to speak to the wider community about initiatives and behaviors to create more safety for us. Mm. And that to me is complicated. To me, there is something that the government can do. There's a whole lot more that we have to do in community, I feel. I feel that the average white Edmontonian who is not getting involved with this, not thinking about what can they do to keep Black Muslim women safe, they're a huge population of people who also vote and elect these elected officials and also lobby and ask them to do things. I need those people to come out, not be silent, stand up, and I need their voices to drown out the voices of those Edmontonians who are being violent against racialized people and racialized women in particular. And the visibility of anti-Black racism and anti-Muslim racism are very specific and vicious, and they have deep underroots. And I say that as a sister and an ally. I am neither African heritage nor Muslim heritage. And I will say that these two threads are long, historic, vicious, and we need people to understand it and to stand up against it. So your question is, are the government doing enough? Probably not, usually not, never. But then the other question is, what is it that the government can do that will actually change the situation? What can the government do? Order more policing? Well, we know from history that that doesn't help. It's not more policing. It's not more surveillance. What we need is an awareness and culture shift in our city. And the government needs to be involved, but community needs to be involved. So on that note, T, let me tell you, before you let me go, let me tell you, this is really important.
I have one more question.
Okay, good,
and then
good.
We're done. No, but tell me, I can't wait to hear it. Let's hear it.
Okay,
Shalini,
okay.
This has
So
been good.
part of our mandate is that we were given a budget for community funding, and we have been developing a community funding program. So I want everyone to know about this because I want everyone to apply.
Community funding, yay!
Yes. I want everyone to apply. So we
Let's
put
go, Shalini. Why did we wait till the end to talk about community funding?
Wait, let's start again. No, I know. This is everyone coming in at the last second. We have to tell them about this. So we're creating a funding program, and it has 4 streams to it so far. It has 4 streams to it. There's a section for youth activation. There's a section for innovation and capacity building for grassroots BIPOC organizations to help with anti-racist initiatives. There's a section for funding matching for those organizations that are gaining funding from somewhere else and they need a funder to match the funding as part of it. And there's a section for participatory action research. So there's 4 sections. And we're hoping to launch this just before the summer, we hope. We want this money in the hands of the community before the end of the year. So think of your initiative. Start emailing us, start getting in contact with city administration who supports us. So that's not the chair email, but if it comes to the chair email, I'll direct it. But it's the ARAC, ARAC at edmonton.ca. Start getting in touch, start asking about it. We want to build these relationships.
Websites to go. I mean, LTC Media Foundation will definitely be applying for innovation. Well, yeah. What's the website we can get more information about this anti-racism funding?
Okay, it's not up on the website yet. So
okay.
Yeah, but if you go to edmonton.ca and if you search for the Anti-Racism Committee, you will find our page, which has so little information on it, but it has the email on it. You know, because again, we're new and we haven't been able to have the structures yet to set up that communication the way we want it. But go to edmonton.ca, search for the Anti-Racism Committee, and you'll find the email there, and email and ask for questions. The funding hasn't been announced yet, so I'm telling you all that it's coming. It hasn't been announced. We're building it. You know, don't be scared to get in touch. Talk to us about how to get involved with this. So one of the things we can do is we can put money in the hands of communities who can do something about this.
Absolutely. It's a third wave as well. And Black communities suffer the most from racism. Shalini, we're going to take a 15-second water break. When we come back, you'll have the final word. Please don't go away. This is LadiesCorner with tea.
Thank you.
Hey, this is LadiesCorner with tea. Today we've been blessed to have the pleasure of the chair of the Anti-Racism Committee at Edmonton Council. She's Shalini Sinha, and I just met her today, and I feel like I've known you for more than an hour. I've kept you for an hour. I'm so sorry, but I'm grateful. I'm really grateful.
Happy to be here. I'm happy to be here and to know you and to know you forever.
Yes. I have to say, when you hear chair Anti-Racism Committee, you panic. You eat up in the sweat, and then maybe you pass out, and then you come back to being go, what am I going to say? You know, but you really made this, you know, easy, deliverable, and I'm grateful for that. I'm so very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. So attacks on Asians, Black women, Black Muslim women is deplorable, and we've spoken about that already. This is the final question. What sort of information do we as media houses or as community people, community activists need to peddle to stop this sort of attacks? And I hear what you said about the government. I hear what you said about the average white Edmontonians getting involved in this thing. What sort of information? Because when people are mean, vicious, and nasty, maybe there's a gap. Maybe there's something lacking in their knowledge.
Oh, okay. This is advice that I am giving as a personal person, Shalini, not as the chair of the Anti-Racism Committee. This is coming from my journey and my work in this area, so my consulting work in that. My advice is do not feel the need to challenge someone directly on your own in the moment. That is my advice. Because people, you know, we need to do this together and with support. There's a reason why the situation is frightening, because it's frightening. But the other thing we need to do is, between these events, we need to strengthen ourselves. I think we need healing in the communities. We need to find out how to provide more healing in the communities. But we need to get these bystanders to be prepared, and to be prepared to stand with us. So I think it's more valuable for a bystander to come and support someone being attacked than to confront the attacker at that time, because you may not have the skills or the ability, and this person is not behaving logically. This is not a rational situation, and you need to keep yourselves safe. But we need to figure out how to be together with that person and give them more resources and support. The number one thing as humans need when we're being attacked, and I don't mean just physically, when we're being hurt, we need to know that we're not alone. We need to know that we are wanted and worthwhile and supported. And so we need people to come in with us. So that's just my one thing. When it's happening, focus on the person it's happening to and provide them support, not confronting. And I would even say that, for example, I was in a workplace and, regularly some of the staff members said something very inappropriate around racism. Well, just said racist things. And it was my position not to take on the responsibility of personally educating them and challenging them. It's my job to look after myself and build up support around me. So I need to find out where's the support for me in that workplace. And then together we might do something, or an ally might do something, but it's not my job to have to take that all on. So I'm just going to say that. But the other thing I want to say is, I don't know if some of your listeners are aware, and I don't want to promote just one thing, so I don't want to get in trouble here. And please comment or share or put information about other things that are happening. But there's a group in Edmonton called the Shift Lab, and they have created a bystanders kit. And I don't know if it's out there yet or if it's in prototype stage. In fact, they have a report soon this week, maybe tomorrow, and I'll have more information. But I would encourage people. This is a not-for-profit organization that are providing resources to respond. I would encourage people to find out about it and to look it up and to access it if they can. And we need more resources like that. I think Black Women in Action in Canada are wanting to create another set of tools and resources. So we need to promote these things, and we need to access them and find them. Does that help? Is that a
Awesome. Oh, that was incredible. We need to look at what not-for-profits like BCW, the Shift Lab, what they are doing, equipping us with information we need as bystanders when we see this racist attacks happening on our women, happening in our communities. Fair enough, because we all have a responsibility. I get what you're saying, as citizens, to act, to protect one another. But I think the crucial thing you said was we all need healing. That again is another session which we won't have time to go, but it's just so beautiful to hear that for this city to come together after all of this pandemic is healing. I want to say thank you, Shalini. I rarely do 1 hour shows, but this has been so beautiful personally for me, and I'm just gushing. I want to say thank you again so much for your time. I'm going to end the broadcast, but please don't go away because I like to ask you one question.
great?
We have
Great.
you. All right, thanks everybody for listening. See you at 7:30 when we have another show for you. Thank you.